Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So, remember we were talking about this position with our Runinja where I forced the bishop back, remember that? And then the bishop took the knight, and now we've reached the stage in which rook takes the bishop. So what happens now? Right, so in this position we have to consider a few things. One, white has a lot more space on the queen side. So for example, white could play something like queen b1, a4, and b5. Those are some plans in the position, right? Another plan is to say queen a1, knight e5, and go for the center, right? Something like that. Another plan is, of course, queen c1, a4, b5, and pressure on c7. So you're going to see how I approach this. Knight h5 is played, and now I play the move bishop d2. Now, the moment the knight threatens the bishop, now you can see that how awkward this knight is, right? It's not doing anything. That's why I would say knight h5 is a little bit of an inaccuracy, because certainly it removes the bishop from attacking that c7 pawn, but you'll notice the result of it, right? The after this happens, probably the best move here is retreating that knight back to f6, because the bishop, well, it's very flexible, right? This knight, it's also very flexible, but would you want to spend a move going back? You wouldn't. So if the knight went back, this bishop would not go here. White doesn't want to draw. Probably would play something like queen b1, a4, b5. Some kind of plan. But instead, queen d7 happened, and here I thought, okay, I had two things to think about. Queen a1 followed by knight to e5. That was one. But I was also thinking about the fact that one day black was going to push b6. Right, so what happens after black pushes b6? So the rook has to retreat, and then, well, it's okay. But the thing is, the knight can move now, and so after b6, rook c8, c5, we're going to see that maybe black is going to get some play back, and I'm going to try to prevent that with the move queen to c1. So this is a dual purpose move. This is a prophylactic move in preventing b6 and preventing black from moving the knight because of the c7 pawn. But I'm also threatening a very sneaky move, and that move is bishop takes h6. So I'm going to show you. Rook f8, and now bishop takes h6. Pawn takes h6, queen takes h6, threatening the knight. And after, let's say, knight g7, knight to g5. So there were probably many more ways you could approach this. e4 could have been one, not very obvious, but the goal is to prevent bishop f5. So after knight g5, bishop f5, now I play the move bishop takes d5. And this is actually a mistake, because after rook takes d5, now you'll see, okay, what if queen to e7 happens? Then rook takes f5, knight takes f5, queen h7, king f8, and queen h8, checkmate. So after rook takes d5, queen c8, then what? e4. And after e4, bishop g6 happens, then what? f4. And after f5, this is completely busted for black, and it's not all great. But instead I played bishop takes d5. Why did I play it? Because I thought this pressure would last. Right? I thought this was the way to go. But after something like knight d8, I was like, e4, and then after bishop g6, queen takes g6, right? That's what I was thinking, because the bishop pins the king, right? So that was one. But black has a brilliant move here. I mean, obviously the engine suggested it, and I didn't see it, but the move here is queen d6. The reason being that I just want to trade this guy, and if you take, now all of a sudden, this pawn is going to be threatening the rook, right? So think about it that way. So the white queen cannot trade, so the queen h4 has to be played. But now bishop g6, and after f4, there's c6 and b6, and maybe there's queen d4, maybe there's knight e6, but it gets a little bit more complex, like c6 or b6 here, then what, f5, and it gets all crazy, right? Say, for example, bishop h5, f6, b takes, f takes, queen h6, or not queen g6, but queen h6, and it's not as easy as we would have hoped, but obviously that's a very hard variation for me to calculate, so I wasn't aware of that during the game. I just went with my instinct. I said the bishop here is going to be good for capturing f7, but no, I was wrong. The rook actually does even more of a job. So after bishop takes d5, our friend Runinja or Runinja plays the move knight to e6, and after knight to e6, it's just that what goes on. First of all, I play the move e4. Now, another move I could have played is bishop takes c6 and take the bishop. That's probably the simpler way to do it. But I played e4, and I said, if you take on c5, I might take on f7. After queen takes, knight takes, king takes, I'm going to play e takes f5 and say, if you take here, then I might play queen g6, and it might get a bit spicy. I don't know. But obviously, that does not want to happen on black's part. So what does black play? Well, if bishop g6 happens, then what? There's bishop takes e6, rook takes e6, knight takes e6, queen takes e6, because if pawn takes e6, there's queen takes bishop. So after queen takes e6, white's going to play the move f4, go for f5, and essentially it should be almost game over. So that was my plan. So by playing e4. So knight takes g5 happened, queen takes g5, and now here's the critical moment. Bishop g6, queen takes g6, just demonstrating the value of these pins. They're very tricky. King f8, now bishop takes f7. Queen takes f7, rook to f5, going for the pin. So knight e7 happened, played queen f6, saying, I'm going to threaten you with a check. So after knight g8, bishop takes, king takes, rook g5, and a mating net ensued. So what happened in this game? Why did I simply just start looking like a boss? Well, to be honest, the first moment really was this move, bishop to a5. I have to say that this was the first moment where I was like, I got the incentive and I'm starting to push through. And the second part was this move knight h5. It kind of felt like it was necessary, but at the same time not necessary. So for example, I felt like knight d7 fit the mood a little bit better. So essentially, after something like rook c2, rook e8, or rook c2, rook c8, but I would say, the knight on the edge of the board, it wouldn't be my recommendation, but it's an okay move. Queen c1, and now bishop takes h6 was just an unbelievable find. I sort of wasn't sure if it worked. So knight g5, and here I have to remind myself, rook takes d5, with the potential of rook takes f5 or just e4 and f4. That should do the job. But I made things more complicated. There was knight d8, as I showed in the game. Excuse me. And then, so after knight e6, there was e4 and this incredibly important pin right here. Bishop takes f7, queen f6, and the mating net ensued. So let's go on to the next game of me against Runinja. So in this game, we played a Dutch. So you'll see that the opening is very normal. This is what's called the Stonewall Dutch, right? So c6, bishop d6, castles. It's pretty normal. But after c5, this is where I would say c5 is not the move white usually plays, because b6. And after b6, the advantage of this is that now the bishop gets a full diagonal. And there's this idea of c5 and knight c6, and it sort of looks like black is doing a great job in the center. And we know from experience that a lot of things happen in the center, right? The openings happen in the center. The middle games, a lot of things are surrounding the center as well. Like, for example, the knight getting onto e5, and knight e5, bishop d6, and now I have to say, knight e4, and at this moment I was considering two things. I was considering the move bishop to b4 check, because after knight c3, knight to e4, we're threatening this, and we're threatening the move g5. But here I saw the move knight to d3, and I said, after knight takes c3, okay, we might take this exchange, but this bishop is no longer trapped. It can get on e5. So I also considered maybe queen b3 if that was an alternative, but I didn't know. So I opted away from it, and I said, let's do knight e4. And I was like, what happens if f3? I thought about this in my mind. But then I saw bishop b4, king e2, bishop a6, knight d3, and the move g5. This is extremely complex, but after takes, we have full pin on the diagonal, and after bishop e5, there is knight d7, and just showing that this bishop is a little bit paralyzed in the center, right? It's not helped by this idea that all these borderline pawns are sort of cornering it, It's the bishop's not in an ideal place to, let's say, back out. So usually in the London, when we go back, right, you'll start to see, okay, bishop comes here, but e3 was the first of the blunders. Essentially saying, this bishop, you have just these two squares to fidget on. So after knight e4, there's only one. And especially because in this position, these pawns do a disservice to this bishop, actually, by not allowing the bishop to go back and disconnecting it with this bishop b4 check. So after bishop g2, I said, let me trap your bishop. And then rook g1, very dangerous looking, but harmless. So at this point, there is only one move here, because white's threatening knight g6 check and knight f7 check. So what is the move here? Bishop takes knight, pawn takes, and now bishop to a6, saying, I'm going to use this diagonal. I might consider going all the way to d3. I might consider putting my queen to d3. And all in all, after knight d2, I start setting on my journey. So I'll leave you at that. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.